What is it costing you when you don't set boundaries? Right now, we're kind of in this time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I don't know if you're feeling it, but if you're starting to feel anxious, anticipating certain events, certain get-togethers, certain days, if you are totally on empty, exhausted at the end of the day, if your mind keeps spinning about, I got to do this and I got to do that, and there's so many things that still have to get done. And what's another one? A big one is resentment. If you're feeling any kind of resentment about, oh, I can't believe I agreed to this. How do I get always like sucked into this thing? Why do they always ask me? Why do I always have to say yes? Those kind of things. And then what is it costing you? It's probably costing you your health, your well-being, your sleep. Sometimes it feels like your sanity, right? It's like, oh, I just want this to be over with. It's definitely costing you, time with your loved ones, time to be able to do things that you would prefer doing, time to spend with those you'd prefer spending it with, and also just your enjoyment. So often then we just wish, I just wish it'd be over with already. I just want to get it done. And then after the fact, when you finally let yourself go a little bit and you did have a little bit of fun, then you're mad at yourself for not letting go sooner, for not enjoying it more. You feel a little bit of that sadness of, oh, now this time of year has passed. So this time, let's do it a little differently. Let's talk about setting boundaries as a highly sensitive or empath, particularly around the holidays, right? I'll talk to you about 4 things today. What is the boundary? Who do you need to set a boundary with, or when you know that you need to set a boundary? And number 3, common boundaries for the holidays. And number 4, how do you actually stick to the boundary? You've decided on a boundary, maybe even communicated it. Now, how do you stick with it and actually pull it through? So let's start with number 1. What is a boundary? And I'm going to steal a definition that I heard from Dr. Becky Kennedy. You hear me talk about her a lot. She's a parenting expert, and I love her definition of boundary. She says a boundary is something that you say that you are going to do. Why is this so important? Because so often we feel like, oh, we finally get the guts to actually state a boundary, and then somebody will just waltz right over it. And you feel like, what even was the point of that? And I can't control them. Well, if a boundary is something that you say that you are going to do, they can't do anything about it and they can't mess it up, right? Like, for example, if you're going to say, I'm only going to stay at this event for 2 hours, well then hold to that, because you are the one who can walk yourself out of that. Make sure that you have a means of getting away, right? Don't ask somebody else, oh, you're going to be driving. No, take your own car, your own means of transportation, so that you can set your own boundary and say, after 2 hours, or when I feel like I'm getting to the point of just too much stimulation, I'm going to get out of here. Or even just saying, if I feel like I'm getting too overstimulated, I'm going to step outside for 5 minutes, right? You're not asking anybody to do anything differently. You are taking that initiative. You are stating what you are going to do. Like with your kid, there's so many things, right? We want to give our kids such a beautiful Christmas time experience, and I'm guilty of that too. And at the beginning of this month, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? There's so many things to do. How can I make this a beautiful experience for my little one? And setting boundaries just means, for me, it means having a plan, right? Anticipating the tough parts that are going to come up, and then already having a plan and deciding what you're going to do, right? That way, if you've already set, like with your kid, if you're going to be like, okay, those are the 5 things I'm going to do to make this a magical time before Christmas, and then your kid asks you about all these other things, you can even brainstorm together with your kid and say, okay, we can't do them all, but we can do these 5 things. What are the favorite 5 things that is within our means that we can do and that we'll both enjoy? That way, you're setting a clear boundary. You've thought about it ahead of time, which kind of already gets us into the second point, right? Like, who do you need to set a boundary with, and when do you know that you need to set a boundary? I would say the biggest way for me to know, because I'm not one who loves boundaries. Oh my gosh, I used to think that boundaries is a dirty word. Like, what do you mean setting a boundary? Boundary just felt so, I'm a freedom seeking being. I love to be free flowing. I love to give other people that space and that freedom. But it is important to set boundaries. Why? Because this is like your own set of values, right? Knowing yourself, knowing what you need, knowing when enough is enough, because otherwise you'll get into grouchiness, into not enough sleep, into resentment, into giving too much of yourself, into overstimulation. Boundaries is kind of a wonderful, now I imagine it as a beautiful container. Right? It's a container that contains your energy, and you get to shape it, and you get to decide how much and what kind of boundary you're going to have today. What kind of shape is this glass going to take on, this vase going to take on for you today or with this particular person, right? So we've talked a bit about when to set boundaries, right? When you feel particularly anxious, right? If you're anticipating something going, oh gosh, I already know this is not going to go well, or oh gosh, I know this person's going to ask me this or this, or just feeling that tension, right? The people you set boundaries with hopefully are the ones who are closest to you. I know that's sometimes the hardest because we are afraid of losing their closeness and their love and their respect, even though I believe they will respect us more if we clearly state our boundaries. Trust me, particularly your significant other, he or she wants to please you. She wants to know what you need, right? So give them that favor and just like communicate clearly of like, oh, you know, this really stressed me out last time. Can we do this differently this time? Or this time I will only want to agree to like 2 parties and not 10 parties, you know, or let's just go earlier in the evening. Or if we go shopping, can we do it then? You know, it's like find things that you know that you need, and then find a way to clearly communicate that, particularly with the people. So people to set boundaries with. I would love for you to write this down for yourself because it is so important, right? Who do I need to set boundaries with? Well, think about the feeling, right? Think about all your connections, your relationship to your significant other, to your kids, to your family, right? To your mom, to your dad, to your sister, to your friend, to your coworker. Think about your relationships, and then instantly as you think about that particular relationship, there's a feeling that comes up, right? And a feeling, and listen to that feeling, to that emotion of like, oh, okay, I need to set a boundary here, right? It's like when you're feeling any kind of anxiety or any kind of worry or any kind of like, oh, this person's going to ask me this, or oh, she always wants to go here, but I really hate to do that. And it's like, if you notice this, write it down. Write down who you feel like you particularly need to set a boundary with and what their expectations are. And then brainstorm over like, how could I word this? Because we always think it's the most loving thing to do to just go along with somebody, to just always show up, to just always be the people pleaser and always be the one to help out. But not necessarily. If you can't do it with a feeling of like pleasure and joy and oh my gosh, I love showing up for this, I love being there for this, I love helping out for this, even though the other people might not be highly sensitive, they'll notice. And particularly if you, in the midst of this event, then get overstimulated, you know how we get. We can get very grumpy, we can get very grouchy, we can get very intense, right? Even if we're not speaking things out loud. So do yourself a favor, do the other person a favor, especially if it's a relationship that you care about. Don't you want to deepen that relationship? Don't you want to be upfront and honest about it? The other person, if they care about you, they're going to notice, oh yeah, there's something going on, but she's not telling me. So take a moment for yourself, decide, what do I need in this particular relationship around this time of year? And how can I communicate this, right? Which gets us right into point number 3, the common boundaries to set around this time of year. So there we go back to like your journal, to brainstorming, to What do you need around this time of the holidays? What is so exhausting for you? What are things you really enjoy doing? And what are things that just really make you tired and worn out, right? We don't have to do everything. I was feeling so overwhelmed at the beginning of this month going, oh my gosh, I just want to make this a beautiful time for my kid. What am I even going to do? If you take a moment to like think back of a really fun time, for me, it was my childhood. It's like, how did I look forward to Christmas so much? What made it a magical time for me? And then just pick a few things, right? It's like, I really like arts and crafts, or I really liked singing the Christmas songs, or I really enjoyed making the cookies, or, what was it that made this such a magical time for you? Or even now as an adult, it's like, what are the things that you're looking forward to? And then what are your worries and anxieties? That way you get clear about what it is that you need, where you need to set a boundary, even just for yourself. Setting a boundary with yourself is really the most important, right? What am I agreeing to this month? How much sleep I need? How much exercise I need? How much time outside I need, right? That's one of my important boundaries for the holidays, is that I'm usually pretty strict on like what I eat, the type of foods I eat, because I know what makes my body feel good and what very quickly gets me into like headache and lethargy and just not feeling good in my body. However, around the holidays, there's so many yummy things that a lot of times I'm like, just a bite here or a bite there. But if that goes over several meals, I start to feel really unwell in my body. So for me, it's a matter of like, I'm going to set a stricter boundary this year of like, I'm not going to have any of this food, or I'm really just going to choose one meal where I'm going to allow myself to have something different. And then I'll go back and I'll prepare, make sure I have things with me that agree more with my body, right? So what are common boundaries for the holidays that you might set? It's like, how many holiday parties are there? How many do you want to go to? Which ones really would bring you joy? Yes, going on a holiday party is like, what do you need in order to feel good? Do we always think it's like the all or nothing kind of thing? Or like, what will people think if we only show up for half an hour? Well, then they're happy to see our face. Hopefully they're happy to see our face. Otherwise, who are these people and why do you want to show up? I feel like showing up for a little time, why not? Don't overthink it. Which is fun to say to a highly sensitive, right? Don't overthink it. But I hear you. Think about the joyful aspects of it. Think about what would really bring you joy. I know sometimes it seems so selfish, and as highly sensitives, we are particularly sensitive to being selfish, to being called selfish. But that's where I kind of go with the principle of Abraham Hicks, one of my favorite channels. I mention them all the time. It's like, when you work on making yourself feel good, you radiate it out. That is an incredible gift that you can give anyone else, and particularly the whole world, is when you are just radiating with joy, with happiness, with love, with laughter, with passion. How do we get there? By setting boundaries, by knowing what we need in the moment, by figuring out what it is that you need. So my biggest thing with boundaries is really to be clear, to do the work ahead of time. What is going to be coming towards me? What am I anxious about? How can I do this differently this time around, right? Time with family. Who are you worried about seeing? How can you limit that time with this person? Can you just clearly set a boundary of saying, hey, today I really want to sit next to this person at the table. I really want to chat with this person at the table. Or how can you make yourself feel good? And also, of course, we want to keep the rest of the table, the rest of the get together, the family, the people, in mind of like what is good for everybody. But also, when I feel good, I help others to feel good, right? Do I need to step out for 5 minutes? Do I need to get some sunshine? Do I need to have my earbuds and go in the next room and just like listening to calm music for 5 or 10 minutes to kind of reset myself? What is it that you need, particularly during the holidays, in order to calm yourself, in order to not get so overstimulated and in order to enjoy it. We'll do that last point really quickly because it's really about sticking to your boundaries. I did want to tell you about this guide that I think is going to come in really handy for shifting your emotions. It's a quick guide, 3 steps of how to shift any emotion. So when you're in the midst of a gathering and you know you're going to have to walk back out there and you're starting to feel yourself get grumpy or whatever mood you're in, right? Or angry at something that somebody said, but you know you have to walk back in there. Use those 3 steps in order to center yourself again, to calm yourself again. Download it. It's a free guide about how to shift your emotions. healingyouremotions.com/shift will get you right to that guide. I'll put that link below too. And then let's get to point number 4. How do you stick to those boundaries? Well, journal about it, because a lot of times, particularly when your boundaries get kind of run over by other people, that's when you're like, oh yeah, I did not set that boundary, or I need to set a more firm boundary. I'll need to word it in a way of what will I do? What am I going to do in that situation, right? So when you journal about it, you realize, oh yeah, this is where I need to go. This is what I need to do differently. This is how I can do it differently next time. So we learn a lot from when others cross our boundaries. And yes, I wrote down what to do if you feel like you're going to disappoint somebody, right? If you've always shown up for something, but it's really never made you very happy, and now you're like, okay, this year I'm not going to do that. You're going to set that boundary. Communicate clearly, right? Decide what you need and then communicate clearly. If you're just going to be like, nope, I'm not going to be there, that might be hard, right, for somebody. But if you say, hey, in the past, I've been feeling like this around the Christmas time, way too overwhelmed, way too anxious. I overload myself. I'm really trying hard this year to have an easier time and to make sure I pay attention to my own health and well-being. And I hope you're doing the same. And for that, I'm having to set some very clear-cut boundaries. And I've only chosen to do these 5 things. And unfortunately, I don't have time for this year. However you want to word it. But if you come at it with clarity and with purpose, right? Of this is what I've thought about. This is what I have decided is best for me. This is what I've decided is best for my family. I really wanted to spend more time with my kid during these weeks, this time of year. Whatever it is, if you are clear about what you need for yourself, for your family, for your well-being, for your health, for your sanity, and then communicate that clearly in a loving way of I really care about you. I really care about this thing that you do. I really care about our friendship, whatever it might be. But for me, I have to set this boundary at this time. People will respect you. But let me know any kind of worries or concerns in the comments below, or DM me, email me, because I'd be curious to hear what you have to say to those things. Yeah, and then just the last point I wrote down there is really kind of a reminder of rather do and commit to fewer things that you can really deeply enjoy, particularly as a highly sensitive. We like to go deep, and it really exhausts us when we're just jumping from one thing to the next and barely going just on the surface of thing, and then we're on to the next thing, right? We like to dive deep. We really like to get into it. So choose fewer things and really, really make it a deep and meaningful and rich experience.